Jody said Weasel Paw, Paw Paw Pale Ale. Weasel Paw is based on an English style pale ale, more specifically a best bitter. So it's a low alcohol beer that had some hop character to it, but nothing like the modern category of American pale ales or IPAs. They're not that aggressive. The hops are obviously different. English hops are more herbal, earthy, floral. None of the big citrus fruit or tropical fruit characteristics or the pungent, piney, astringent things. So it's a very smooth, flavorful beer to start with. Had a lot of hop flavor, not overly bitter. We chose that because our own personal view on Paw Paw beers is that Paw Paw does not blend well with some of the hop varieties or blend well with a very firm bitterness. Now it can be done. There's some great examples that have been here over the years that have done that. I feel it's harder to do, and I think someone that's more of a hop head than me needs to do that. So we chose something very balanced, very low alcohol. Ours is just a hair over 4%. Good warm weather beer, good balance. We didn't want the beer to be too sweet. We wanted the Paw Paw to be featured. We want that fruit character there. We wanted, to blend in with all the other malt and hop flavors. Didn't want anything to be out of balance. We felt that was easier to do with a low alcohol beer, something that wasn't overly bitter or overly malty, a nice balance in the middle. So that's why we chose the beer that we did. Like I say, this is the 7th year we produced this beer. It's been very successful for us as a summer seasonal up at the pub in Zanesville. And it's been very well received down here, so we've seen no reason to do anything differently, quite honestly. We also like to continue to offer it because we're always, well, not always, I believe Little Fish did one last year that was, what, around 3%? Or was that you, Devil's Kettles? Was that you? Okay. So you can do this with high alcohol beers, low alcohol beers all over the board, all different styles. That's the joy, I think, of coming down here and experiencing it, because we all have different approaches to what we're doing, and overwhelmingly they all seem to work and come together and make a really nice, enjoyable beer. So that was our approach. We purchase our Paw Paw locally from Integration Acres. We get a frozen pulp and add it to our beer post fermentation. Have a slight secondary fermentation. We kind of taste it through because every year the product can be a little different, so we kind of wait for that fruit flavor to come to the balance we want it at with the rest of the beer and all the other flavors. So we don't actually have a set time that we put in contact with it. It's just more keep sampling the beer, taste it as it's coming along. When you reach the balance, get it off the pulp, get it carbonated, and get it in the kegs. So it's more taste dependent than time dependent as far as our contact time with the pulp. We've had batches that our contact time may be as short as 4 or 5 days. We've had other batches that might be going on 2 weeks. Every year, like I say, that Paw Paw is a little different. Depends on where Chris harvests it at. Depends on what variety of the species that it is. So a lot of variables there. So I think your process needs to be nailed down, but you need to really trust your palate if you're going to brew one of these things. We like the soft freeness of Paw Paw. Some fruits are really big in your face. I like the fact that it's not a tart fruit in the beer, at least at the concentrations we use it at. And we use quite a bit. We use about 25 pounds or a little more per barrel of beer. A barrel's 31 gallons. So not as heavy as some, but not as light as others. I've heard a lot of guys say they use around a pound per barrel, or I'm sorry, a pound per gallon. That's pretty close to what we are. We're a little underneath that. So I think this beer, like I say, it doesn't come across too sweet. It's very smooth, I think. We carbonate our beer a little lower as well. Again, I think that helps the smoothness of the beer and makes the fruit pop out a little more. But again, when you finish, you get a little bit of residual. I get more kind of the banana end of the Paw Paw in there, but it doesn't hang on there. It's not cloying. It's not sweet. Technical malfunction. That's supposed to clip in there. Okay. If anybody didn't get any of Jay's beer, we have some up here in the front. They're kind of passing it back around. We have dispatched our runners to get our second beer, which is Black Box's Cookie Duster, so that'll be here momentarily. Meanwhile, Jay's going to keep talking. So those are my perceptions and interpretations of it. The hops are very much supporting role in this beer. The bitterness basically balances off the fruit and the malt of the beer. So what's some of your perception on that? What do you guys get out of it?
I think you did good. Real fruity.
I like the Paw Paw. You can definitely taste the Paw Paw.
Well, we use a forced carbonation method, so we transfer our beer out of our fermentation tanks over to a tank that we refer to as a bright beer tank, although it's more correctly a carbonation tank in our brewery because we don't filter the beer bright. And then we just add a specific pressure of CO2 to a specific temperature of beer, and the formula should give you proper carbonation. There are special tools you can use to check it to make sure it's where you want it, or you can just trust your palate. So. Oh well, yeah, most beer is carbonated. Now there are exceptions to everything, but.
Last question: you add the most pulp. You get even more of the fruit flavor.
You get more fruit flavor by probably adding more fruit to the same size batch that you're brewing, and you could also probably get more flavor to an extent by lengthening your contact time. So the longer the beer sits on the fruit, theoretically, you should get a stronger flavor, but you will hit a point of no return there where that's all you're going to get out of it. And you don't want to sit too long because you want to get it off that point. You'd have to see what these guys do. Our average just depends. It's usually between a week and 2 weeks. We taste the beer a lot just to make sure it's where we want it as far as the flavor potency. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, when you talk about using the pulp, the contact with the pulp, at what point do you actually add the pulp during the brewing and fermentation process?
After we brew our beer, we go through the primary fermentation, so that we put the freshly brewed chilled wort on top of the yeast. The yeast goes through its primary fermentation. In our brewery, it's usually going to take about 4 to 6 days. Just depends on how happy our yeast is at that time, you know, what generation yeast we're in, blah, 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 stuff you don't really care about. But then we'll give it a little bit of time for that yeast to drop as well, but like maybe a couple of days after the fermentation is really ceased. And then we'll keep our temperature warmer. We'll drop it maybe 5 degrees into the lower 60s, but we don't want to completely drop the yeast out of suspension because that pulp still has sugars in it that the yeast is going to consume. So then we add the pulp to the fermenter directly after our primary fermentation has ceased. And then that'll get some of the yeast active again. It'll ferment some of that sugar out of the Paw Paw fruit. Typically that doesn't get really, really vigorous and it doesn't last a really long time for us. And then that's when we start sampling the beer every day to see where we're at with the flavor impact of the pulp itself.
Do you do anything to the pulp before you add it to the beer to prevent contamination?
Nothing. We get it from integration frozen and just it thaws and we put it right in. So there's no sanitation, no pasteurization, no anything like that. I'm going to guess that just the acidity of the fruit itself and the sugar content really inhibits a lot of bacteria, wild yeast growth. The beer doesn't sit around for ages and ages. And when we have actually aged Paw Paw kegs, we don't see any ill effects from not doing anything aseptic for it. I am not the guy to talk to about I'm assuming, are you talking about nitrogen? Okay. Yeah, nitrous, we'd all be laughing our ass off. Yeah, we don't do any nitrogen beers at Weasel Boy. It's not something I personally care for. I don't. A lot of people love nitrogen carbonated beers, so that would be something to speak to someone that might have experience with that. So I'll let us move on to the next brewery.
At the, how can I put, the influences from the growing period, which Paw Paws you're getting, when they were harvested. There's a lot of little things going on there that if you look and do it one certain way every time, and it's by the numbers every time, and it's the way you've always done it, you're not going to probably be as satisfied doing your beers because of that. You're going to have to be flexible in everything in brewing this beer. I mean, there are times that it doesn't show up on time. There are times that you have oxidation of the product that you have to deal with. You got numbers to deal with on sugar content, on acidic values on this, on everything, that if you just go by, well, last year I used 3 to 5 pounds, I'm using 3 to 5 pounds this year, you probably will wind up being inconsistent and unhappy with your product. So always pay attention to the fruit itself. and always look at what you're trying to accomplish. One of the things in the AHA, which is American Homebrewers Association, and their guidelines is when you're doing a beer and adding something to it, you cannot lose the base beer. You're still supposed to go through and carry that base beer through what you're making. So yes, we are making a Paw Paw beer, but in reality, you still want to taste that base beer behind or involved with that Paw Paw. So yeah, anybody can just throw 15 pounds of Paw Paw and yeah, there you go, you got a Paw Paw beer. But if you're trying to balance it correctly and look at what you're trying to accomplish, and especially if you're entering competitions or looking for professional opinions, make sure it's balanced with the style. So if I say I am doing an IPA Paw Paw, there you go. Or I'm doing a porter Paw Paw, or I'm doing a wheat Paw Paw, or whatever. Make sure we're not losing that fact of what your base is. Malts have a lot to do with the balance too. I mean, not just throwing a bunch of Paw Paws in to get all the Paw Paw flavor. Like mine's a little bit drier because we go a little longer, but we do more of a maceration with the fruit, where again, most of these guys and myself found that adding the fruit later on gives you more of the character. So the maceration or the absorption of the fruit characters into the beer, and then we let this go a little drier because we're using a Belgian yeast. It's a little bit different. There are some guys that put it in with the boil. It's all up to you what you want to do. But remember also, caramelization of the sugars is going to be a perceived character that sometimes overwhelms the soft subtleness of your Paw Paws. So have fun with it. It is a good time. I have played with the nitrogen and the Paw Paws. We do a 70-25 blend at the shop, and the creaminess comes out, the mouthfeel comes out a little bit nicer. If you didn't know, CO2 does have a character to it. It does add a astringency to the beer. It takes away from the cloyiness, and that's a way that if it does get a little bit too sweet for you, you can take your CO2 absorption levels from maybe the 1.9s to 2.1s, 2.2s, and that'll help fix that too a little bit. So, any questions really, or I mean, he covered most everything. Yes, sir.
What do you do when you macerate? Exactly how are you doing?
What we do is we go through primary fermentation to make sure our yeast is healthy, but we're looking at the downside a little bit because we don't want it to aggressively attack the sugars in the Paw Paw. We're looking at probably, I think it's 7 days, 6 days, right around that from primary. It's basically almost done. And then we actually take that beer and move it into a new tank, refrigeration tank, with the Paw Paw, so that we're blending it back up in a new environment. A little bit of oxygen helps keep it going, but that rousting the yeast keeps it going. You get a lot of dropout, but I like the absorption of the characters that come out like that. We're going at right around the same. We're about 68, 67 degrees. Primary's a little bit different.
Can you kind of talk through like why you chose this style and the other, like
Sure.
the peppercorns, how you came to choose those?
What I look at, again, going back to the AHA guidelines, what was I trying to accomplish with this? I thought that with the characters of the Paw Paw itself, the Belgian yeast cultures would be easily lent to it. It would give it the characters, not too off course. The rye I put in here because of the floralness of the rye, the characters that are coming out of the rye, I thought it also blended really well with the Paw Paw. And the Telecherry peppercorn, I knew there was a lot of cloyiness in the Paw Paw, and I thought the heat or the dryness from the peppercorn, the Telecherry peppercorn especially, really did well. And a couple videos and things that I researched, I saw workers working in the fields, and when they would take a break, they were sprinkling pepper on a lot of their Paw Paws, and I thought that was really interesting, so I kind of carried that over. I wanted to use that in there. And I use real peppercorn. We grind them up. It's a lot of work. This is not a simple beer, guys. This is work.
Beer.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
This is cookie duster?
This is cookie
Is
duster.
it the same as your Belgian saison?
No, it is not. We do a Belgian saison, which somehow got mixed up a couple years ago as a Belgian saison. We do separately. This is we call it a Belgian oatmeal rye is what we go with, because there's oatmeal, there's rye, The Patella cherry peppercorns in this.
And what are they serving over at the tent?
They're serving the oatmeal, the cookie duster. And the reason we named it a long time ago to make it different, some of these guys can remember, our beer used to be blue. All right? And the reason it was blue is because I wanted to be different and I wanted to go. I've been to these events about 9 years now, and everybody walks up to the counter and goes, "Give me a Paw Paw beer." And the guy goes, "Okay, which Paw Paw beer do you want?" And you're like, "The good one." And they're like, "Oh." So we wanted to change it a little bit, and we added something called X-Berry. X-Berry is a skin of the grapes. I'm also a winemaker, and so we use that, and it's purpley. And I swear to God, if you get it on anything, it's not going away. You're purple for a while. So we were able to use a little bit of that to give us a neat bluish color, and it separated us, and everybody's like, "Oh, give me that blue one." It kind of was fun. People saw it. It was visual, plus it tasted good. And then when you took a sip of it, you had this beautiful purpley blue mustache. So we called it Cookie Duster, and it kind of stuck with it, and it's been ever since. So a lot of fun. There's a lot, you got to have entertainment. You got to have imagination in brewing beer. But remember, let it dictate to you what you do. You do not dictate to the beer what you're gonna do.
Personal question. What made you want to start brewing beer?
It was cheaper. I guess it was a growth from what I used to do. I liked restaurants. I was in the restaurant business. I liked cooking. I liked the expression of people. I liked being part of the get-togethers. And when I saw people were enjoying that, and I was making the wine, they were enjoying that. It came naturally. This is in 2002, matter by the way. Okay, this is 14 years ago. We decided to get into brewing beer. We saw a niche. We saw the excitement. We saw the independent guys starting to come out, the homebrewers wanting to learn more. So we figured we'll put some beers out. And the assistant came up by chance. The guy was down on his luck. He had to move out of the building, and we had a good deal, and it went forward. It's still fun to be part of something. It's also fun to be part of a tradition. And that's where the kick I get out of a lot of this is they look for the beer for the Thanksgiving, they look for it for the holidays, they look for it for their daily or even, their family get-togethers. And that's just such an honor to be part of that tradition, especially if it's going for 12, 14 years now. Anybody else? Beautiful. Thank you guys coming again. Stick with the weather. We'll be fine tonight.
It's kind of good that I get to, warn people before they get my beer, because my beer is going to be a total left turn for some of you. And it's probably good to sometimes prep people for when they're going to get something that's completely different. So whereas Jay probably used, English ale strain probably. Jerome used a Belgian strain. Mine's a little bit closer to the Belgian strain, but mine is conservative. Sorry, I'll talk into a little bit more. Mine is Brettanomyces, which is a wild yeast strain, as different from all the Saccharomyces strains that are traditionally used for ales and lagers. Brettanomyces is traditional in the Belgian sour and lambic style of brewing. This one is 100% fermented with the Brettanomyces in the primary fermentation. So it does not have the time to get sour, but I'll probably throw some of this beer into barrels for, who knows, a year or two, and maybe I'll pick up some other weird bugs or something like that from the barrel and turn sour. We'll see on that in a couple years. Maybe it'll be here in 2017. So yeah, that's the main thing that sets this one apart. So I chose the Brettanomyces because quite frankly, when it comes to fruit beers, I pretty much don't drink any fruit beers that aren't at least funky with Brettanomyces or sour. So I find with Paw Paw that is already kind of a funky, strange tasting fruit. I think it melds really well with the kind of weird fruity flavors that Brettanomyces kicks out. Has kind of a little bit of that barnyard aroma, but also a little bit of a lemon and mango kind of fruitiness as well. The base of the beer is pretty much mostly Pilsner, but then I added a little bit of English caramel malt for some character and sweetness to round it all out. Pretty basic hopping, but when I originally designed it, I didn't plan on adding any dry hops, but once it was fermenting, I just decided, what the hell, I'm gonna throw in some fruity hops that I think will meld well with it. So I dry hopped it with some Centennial and Nelson Sauvin. Nelson Sauvin particularly gives kind of a white grape kind of flavor, I think, wininess that I think melds well with it. And Centennial is just so generally fruity and like tastes like Fruit Loops or Tricks or something like that to me. So I thought that would be a good one, and kind of like the way it just has that distinct, bright hop fruitiness. Got the Brettanomyces fruitiness and the actual Paw Paw fruitiness all blending together to have a very complex flavor that's unique. I feel like I mostly covered talking about the beer. Anybody have any questions while I think about some stuff? Yeah, so lambics are a Belgian style of beer where they age them with, they're fermented with Brettanomyces, often as secondary fermentation, often with other types of bacteria and all that give them sourness. So over the years, they age them 1, 2, 3 years, and straight lambic is usually served about 1 year old and is slightly sour. Old lambic is more like 2, and then there's something they call goose, where they usually blend 1, 2, and 3 year old beer together, which creates very different levels of funkiness and sourness and maltiness all together. It'd be a very complex, almost wine-like brew that are fantastic. They definitely cost a pretty penny for a good one, but I think they're worth it every once in a while when I feel like splurging.
I have not brewed with Brett yet. Is there any difference really during the fermentation?
In general, no. Brettanomyces, after all, is still just a yeast. There's a lot of fear about it, mostly from winemakers, because while it's still a yeast, it can eat cellulose, and that means it could burrow its way into a barrel. And for a winemaker, if they get that Brettanomyces in that barrel, they got to get rid of that barrel. It could infect other barrels and kind of just screw up your whole winery. But in a brewery where it's stainless steel, rubber gaskets, you use a lot of heat to heat everything. Sure, I'm a little bit more careful whenever I use it. As opposed to doing like a cleaning cycle at 140, I might be doing it at 160 for twice as long. I might soak my gaskets in sanitizer an extra cycle or something like that. But after all, like I'm not too scared of Brettanomyces and haven't had any kind of problem with it. My actual sour beers, I'm lucky enough to have a separate building. So anything with bacterias that really are very small microorganisms that can really burrow their way into even those rubber gaskets and any kind of porous material. Those ones are scary, and I don't like those things to enter my brew house at all. Only when they're in a keg. Yes?
How many gallons are you brewing at a time? And talk a little bit about variability.
Yeah, so I have a 20-barrel brew house. I'm pretty young, so a 20-barrel brew house is quite big. I've actually found so a barrel is 31 gallons. So 20-barrel brew house is 620 gallons. I've actually found that I prefer to turn over my hoppier beers more often, just to keep them fresh. So I generally do about 12 barrel batches of those. Just kind of works out with the level of my heat and cooling jackets in my equipment. So whatever 12 barrels is, that's 372 gallons. So I do a lot of those. Actually, there's a funny thing about this beer here. I actually intended it to be more like upper 6%, but I tried to do a very small batch on my system, which was kind of awkward. These systems are really designed to do full batches for the most part, and I've had to kind of learn how to do the partial batches and be efficient with them. But this one I tried to do like a 6 to 7 barrel batch, and I kind of screwed up my numbers and ended up with like 8.5 barrels. And so it just kind of got diluted. But as opposed to what Jerome was talking about, consistency, I figured that this is going to be a one-off beer that I'm not going to brew again for another year. So whatever, I'm just going to roll with it. It's going to be unique to this year, and it's going to be 6%.
Cool.
Yeah.
What strain of Brent are you using?
Bruxellensis. Any other questions? I guess one thing that came to mind, the other two brewers were talking about they add their Paw Paw post-fermentation. It's kind of ironic in that I have the actual funky yeast strain that people are worried about getting infections with and all, but I just kind of don't trust fruit, and so as opposed to adding it post-fermentation, I add it during the peak of fermentations, what they call high krausen, when the yeast is the most active. So I just feel like yeast is a pretty tough, larger microorganism than bacteria or whatever like that. So once it's active and really just grubbing down all those sugars, you throw that Paw Paw in there, the yeast is going to outcompete any type of bacteria that's on the Paw Paw. But then again, I'm probably going to add bacteria and a more intentional bacteria to it as I age and sour some of this beer as well. Oh, anymore? I don't know. I don't have the next beer yet, but I can hand it over to Jody and hear about the one that's coming up.
Next beer.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Sean White. I'm from Little Fish Brewing Company. We are in Athens, Ohio, and we've been open for a little over a year now, just like a month less than Cameron. So this is our second Paw Paw Festival. It's a lot of fun. It's just a great family festival. So and we love local ingredients, and so getting to do something with Paw Paw, that's always going to happen every single year. So. The beer that we brought, it was a bit of improvisation this year. So I brewed this fresh beer. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So the beer that I had intended to bring was, it was going to be a Paw Paw Saison that was dry hopped with tropical New Zealand fruits. And so we started with our base Saison du Poisson, which is brewed with Ohio malted spelt, Ohio malted barley, our typical hop bill for a Saison. We brewed that up, and the reason I was thinking about going with that particular style is, our Saison yeast, it has some fruity character to it that I think that kind of yeast can possibly accentuate or sort of work with the tropicalness of the Paw Paw fruit. So that was kind of my idea, was to get a beer that was sort of emphasizing that the tropical character, not just through the Paw Paw fruit alone, but through also the yeast strain and through the hops that we were using. So we fermented out our Saison as usual. Then we added Paw Paw at about 1/2 pound per gallon, so like 3 buckets of Paw Paw for a 10 barrel batch. And then after it fermented for about a week on the Paw Paws, we came back and dry hopped it with a hop called YET, which I have never used, but it's a New Zealand hop. And just looking down a lot of the aroma descriptors, it has a lot of that tropical character. Similar to like Nelson Southern, it's also a New Zealand hop. So that was the basic beer, and that was just finished like a couple days before the Paw Paw Festival. We had it all carved up and ready, and I liked it a lot. It was tasting great. The kind of split decision that I made on this beer was, I've had a beer in some oak barrels for about a year, maybe a little bit over. That started its life as an American Pilsner that's brewed with organic Ohio corn, and I added Brettanomyces to it, and there was something about this beer that I just truly did not like. I added PawPaws to sort of try and fix it earlier on in the process, and a year later down the line, or almost a year later, I was looking at these barrels and I was thinking, this just sucks, like this beer sucks, I'm gonna dump it. to get the barrels back, and the specific flavor I was tasting was sort of like an autolyzed or dead yeast sort of rubber tire sort of character. Yeah, it's really bad. You can taste it in certain beers and wines too. Just don't like it. But you know, I thought I'd give it like one last taste. It was, again, I think this was like on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, and I found that rubber tire character through all of the barrels had cleaned itself up, because that's what Brett does over time. Even sometimes when you've given up hope on it, is it will come and clean up some of those bad flavors, and it had chewed through that raunchy character that I didn't like, and so I started just playing with some blends. Came up, you know, I did some with more Paw Paw barrel aged and some with more fresh, and I tended to like this kind of, I guess we're still pouring the beer, so you guys haven't tasted it yet, but oh, I didn't get it. Can somebody pour me a beer, please? Anyway, yeah, so ended up with this proportion, which blended some of the fresh elements. The only thing that I still didn't really love about the barrel was it was a little too paw-paw-y. It was a little too kind of perfumey, and almost, I find that Paw Paw, when used at high rates, it can be, even if the beer is dry, it can be kind of cloying. And like, it leaves, whether it's literally sweet, it has a sweet character that it kind of sticks around a little too long. I don't know, that's just my personal preference. But anyways, so this beer, I'm trying to think of anything else I want to say about it. The name reference is just understory is where the Paw Paw tree grows in the forest canopy. So just a little reference to that. We'll probably be, I've still got, actually, because we blended the barrels in, now I've got like almost 20 barrels of finished beer, so we will bottle it too. It'll be bottle conditioned, it'll undergo another round of Brett re-fermentation in the bottle. Any questions? All the way. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
What strain?
So our primary strain is Omega Yeast Labs 500 Saison strain, and then the Brett, I would really have to look at this point. I think it's Brett C and Brett Dre, both, and all the way back.
How do you prepare the Paw Paw? Kind of different fruit, you know, not like other strains. What do you do to it?
Sure. Well, actually, we should have Chris Schmiel here to tell us how he prepared our Paw Paw for us, because everybody here on the panel uses a frozen Paw Paw pulp that Chris, the main organizer, founder of this festival, that's one of his food products. So what I do know that Chris does is he has a Paw Paw pulping machine, and so he basically buys pawpaws from all these foragers in the region, and they all go through the machine, and I believe they're de-seeded and probably the skin is taken off, so it's just pulp, and then that is frozen in 5-gallon buckets. And he calls you up before Paw Paw Festival, and he's just like, okay, how many buckets do you want? And, you know, we just tell him, okay, bring me 3, 4, however many buckets, and it just shows up. And it's, I mean, I don't think we could conceivably do it as a brewery any other way. I mean, if I were a home brewer, yeah, it'd be awesome to go out and, you know, forage 5 to 10 pounds of fresh Paw Paw fruit, and, you know, at the peak of ripeness, to slice them up and mush out the puree and put that right in the fermenter. That'd be awesome. You know, we don't. That's one luxury that we kind of have to give up on our system, because I need like an army of monkeys to help us. Yeah. Anyone else have questions?
What's a combination that you might have seen out there that is a very bad idea to, you know, use a certain yeast or use a certain style, or that you think is not going to work with Paw-Paws? Like something to avoid?
That's a good question. Could you repeat that?
She basically asked if there were any sort of styles or flavor combinations to avoid with Paw Paw. Not really, but I mean, you know, maybe not like Imperial Stout or just something that's going to completely, I mean, you have to use so much Paw Paw to be able to compete with those other flavors. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else. Any other brewers have comments
what do
on
you
that?
guys think? I don't like them with aggressively hoppy IPAs. I think the hops really clash with Paw Paw fruit. There are some hops that work well with PawPaws, but balance is really important with those. Like both these guys use the New Zealand tropical fruit hops, which PawPaw is very much like a tropical fruit in flavor and character, even though it's from the upper Midwest and the plains. But like a lot of these really pungent, piney, resiny, sticky, gooey, aggressive hops that you see in a lot of the really popular IPAs today, I think they really work badly with the fruit character of Paw Paw. This is going to be really a subjective question because everybody has different flavor preferences, but that's my opinion.
Another thing I've personally liked it with a lot is a Hefeweizen strain, because that's another strain that throws a lot of banana, which, you know, a Paw Paw has a lot of similarities to, I would say, banana, mango, and pineapple. And so, again, to sort of just re-emphasize that Paw Paw character, but through a completely different vehicle, that could be a fun one. Oh, and you, sir?
Just general question for any of you. I'm not a brewer, I'm not a drinker, but I grow PawPaws and there's some microbreweries in my neighborhood. What kinds of things would I say to brewers to interest them in growing PawPaws?
I guess it depends on their. This is my personal take. Leave it up to these guys too. But I'm sorry. So he is a Paw Paw grower, and he is asking if he is trying to get breweries in his area interested in brewing with Paw Paw fruit. What should he talk to them about, or what should he tell them to get them online? I mean, my personal take would be just start with you know, what's their level of experience. I mean, have they ever had a Paw Paw fruit? Have they ever had a Paw Paw beer? You know, start there.
That's what I do.
Samples are great, but unless they are an incredibly small brewery, they're probably going to want to see some processed pulp that they can use as a more convenient option, I would say. Mm-hmm. Anybody else, brewers?
Yeah, we don't have, most of us don't have the time or the facility to play around trying to skin and seed.
Well, no, I can provide pulp.
Yeah, that's what it would have to be, and then you just have, the brewery has to be interested in doing it. That's about the bottom line.
Right time of the year.
Yeah.
I would maybe look for, you said you have a homebrew, maybe there's someone that you could sort of partner up with that would brew some beer on a homebrew system. Yeah, I mean, because if I were a brewer, if I had no concept of what Paw Paw beer tasted like, and you hand me a sample, I mean, that would be sort of a way of getting a feel for it, maybe gaining some trust in the product and getting an idea of what it could do.
Oh, man. More beer.
That's all I got.
I got nothing.
All right, another good beer.
Does everyone know Chris Schmiel?
Yes.
Chris Schmiel, there would be no such thing as a Paw Paw Festival if there was no such thing as Christopher Schmiel of Integration Acres here in the Athens, Ohio region. All right. Chris Schmiel came to me 15 years ago and said, you know, Kelly, I want you involved in the Paw Paw Festival, which this is its 18th year. In 2002, we decided that we would start working towards a Paw Paw beer for the Paw Paw Festival. So, I don't know if I'm following topic, but it's irrelevant, don't care. So we started making a Paw Paw beer in 2002. I was with Marietta Brewing Company, and for the first 5 or 7 years, my brewery was the only one that made Paw Paw beer for this festival. We couldn't possibly make enough beer for this festival. I mean, look at all you thirsty people out there. It's a lot of beer. So it hit a point where I started calling in friends and saying, help, you're a brewer, make some Paw Paw beer. So we started bringing in, some of the other originals were Jackie O's here in Athens, which at the time wasn't called Jackie O's, it was a Hooli. We brought in Jerome and we brought in Jay, Weasel Boy and Black Box Brewing Company. We brought in Buckeye Brewing Company. And I think we were the original 5 after Marietta, setting up the Paw Paw beer. Yes. The original Paw Paw beer was my brewery, which was Marietta Brewing Company.
They're still there.
They still exist. They're here. Their beer is here. Yes. I don't brew it. I'm not involved in the brewery any longer. But they're still making a great beer, and they're still involved in this festival. Yes. Yes. We've expanded to the point where we just brought in other friends because we need more beer. And that was the awesome thing. So, the 2 other breweries in Athens were like, we're here. And we're like, well, shit, yeah, heck yeah. Let's brew some beer. So we started bringing in, we were up to, I think we had 11 breweries last year, and I think we're at 9 this year, as far as involved in the festival, which is awesome. These people are great. I don't brew beer for a living anymore, but if you want to pop off cider, I do make cider for a living at the West End Cider House in Athens, and I'll give a shameless plug. Plug, there it is, So if you want to pop off cider, you can go down to the cider house tonight and grab a pint for that.
All right, just stirred our interest. Talk a little bit about Paw Paw cider, please.
This is a beer for
This is a beer It's the exact same as beer. How about that? I mean, really. It depends on the yeast strain and the age. Cider. My philosophy has always been with beer and with ciders, with fruits, is I always I make the base beer, which I believe everyone here except for one basically makes the base beer and then adds fruit to the base beer. Cider is very similar. I make a base wonderful cider using the apples available here in southeastern Ohio. I don't buy apples from Kentucky, West Virginia, Michigan, California, or China. Straight local apples. And we ferment those out into a nice cider. Then the fruit come on, and I like the fact that fruits, and who was it that was worried about fruits? So I think it was Cam, and I understand. Fruits naturally have wild yeast in their skins. They have all these crazy bacteria inherently within the fruit itself. And unless you pasteurize or somehow sanitize that bacteria or those crazy wild yeast and those bugs that are in there, boom, they're going to get into your beer. But I like the fact that I make a beer first. Alcohol is a great sanitizing agent. I add the fruit after my beer is produced, so alcohol is produced, and I have less concern with the effects, the negative potential effects of the bacteria and the wild yeast that are in the skins and the pulp of the fruit itself. And that's my take. And the cool thing about that too is you don't have heat destroying and breaking down the flavors and the aromas that are inherent in the fruit, because those go away.